Now we're recording in March. There's a Becker's podcast that just got released probably this morning or yesterday, and they mentioned the growth. So no surprise, Zach, I think started back in 22. Does that sound right?
January 22 is when it went into effect.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there were, they said, a couple 100,000 dispute or IDRs at that point. And in 25, it went up to a few million.
Yeah.
So it's being used. If you are a healthcare provider out there right now who is not using it, you're going to learn, I think, right now how to and why it's important you do so. But let's start again, big picture here, kind of a 101. Can you tell us what the No Surprises Act is and what's the role of the IDR process within it?
Yeah. So the No Surprises Act was really put in place to prevent surprise medical bills to patients. At a very high level, that was kind of the goal and objective of that solution. However, what ended up happening as a result of that was providers in an out-of-network setting were getting paid at out-of-network rates that were considerably lower because of the original cost shares between payer and patient. So what ended up happening is you had an expectation essentially of, say 65% of charges, even though 80% of that was due from the patient, 20% was due from the payer. Now, all of a sudden, you have instances where really your expectation for that encounter is like 20%. And the goal is you can't bill patients for anything higher than essentially the in-network equivalent rate. So you had these high expectations that basically got chopped in half, or even less. And so the IDR process was really a means for providers. 99% of the time they're the initiating party, but the providers to go through a formal arbitration process to really get, I would say, in-network equivalent rates for a particular service, and that rate being paid by the payer themselves. And so that's what the process was created around. To your point, I think CMS has expected something like 30,000 submissions or something very low the first year. And I think they were at 3 to 4 times that amount. And so they ran into a situation where there was a lot of backlog that the IDREs, the folks that do the arbitrations, fell really far behind.
Yeah. They see the numbers now, and I think they've been part of this podcast I listened to this morning. They've been introducing some technology to help make sure that they don't rebuild backlogs, which is good to hear.
Yeah, right now they had originally 13 IDREs signed up under the program to do the arbitrations, and they're now trying to dramatically expand that to be able to offset the volume increases that they're seeing. But what I would say overall, and I will try to spend the rest of my time proving this, small population of encounters, right? Similar to what we said before, but on a per encounter basis, I would argue it's the single largest revenue improvement opportunity that an organization, if they're not pursuing, is missing out on. And I will try to prove that to you over the next several minutes here.
Yeah, no, there's a tremendous amount of, I won't steal your thunder. There's a tremendous amount of numbers that are in the favor of providers.
Yep.
So it is an absolutely fantastic opportunity. This show was brought to you by Real Partners Consulting, a free-to-provider vendor selection support company. We help healthcare providers find the right revenue cycle partners across technology, consulting, and managed services at no cost to you. If you like what you heard from today's guest, or if you're looking for any other partner in the revenue cycle space, let us do the heavy lifting for you. Reach out to me, your host, Ryan Downs, on LinkedIn or at rdowns@realpartnersconsulting.com, and I will personally help you find the right fit. Now let's get back to the episode.
What we're seeing is that providers are winning on average about 85% of the time, right? And when they're winning at 322 to 350% of the QPA. So essentially 3 to 3.5 times Medicare, right? Which is a really,
my favorite part.
Yeah, which is a really, really cool rate. And that's not Adam saying that. There's obviously literature online with case studies on this. But if you think about it, from 22 to 24, there was over $2 billion that was paid back to providers because of this process. And then the cool thing is that we're starting to see on the back end is once you get, and keep in mind, your out-of-network populations are usually very narrow, right? It's not like every payer in the book. It's usually a narrow set. Once you start successfully winning against those payers, there's three things that we see happen. One, they start paying higher on future initial remits for out-of-network claims because they don't want to be taken through the arbitration process because of the fees associated with it and time on their end. Two, they start to offer better rates in open negotiation or become a lot more amenable to partnering to figure out what the good rate is. And then three, which is something that we didn't expect, but we've seen it now twice, is the payers actually come back to the table to want to go back in network. So
Yeah,
what
it
we're
makes sense.
is material impact on payer behavior, which is great for the provider. And we've in some cases worked ourselves out of a job because the major payer went back in network, which is great for the organization. They're not paying out of network anymore, so the IDR process doesn't apply.
Yeah, that's a wealth of knowledge, Adam. I appreciate it. This might be my favorite thing in revenue cycle right now as we sit in March of 2026 because the win rate is crazy high. The amount that's paid is crazy high. And then the kind of lesser intended or lesser direct consequences that you just mentioned are really in the favor of the provider as well.